The great thing is not having a mind. Feelings, oh, I have those. They govern me. I have a Lord in heaven called the Sun, and open for him, showing him the fire of my own heart, fire like his presence. What could such glory be if not a heart? Oh, my brothers and sisters, were you like me once, long ago, before you were human? Did you permit yourselves to open once who would never open again? Because in truth, I am speaking now the way you do. I speak because I am shattered. At the end of my suffering, there was a door. Hear me out. That which you call death, I remember. Overhead noises, branches of the pine shifting. Then nothing. The weak sun flickered over the dry surface. It is terrible to survive as consciousness buried in the dark earth. Then it was over. That which you fear, being a soul and unable to speak, ending abruptly, the stiff earth bending a little, and what I took to be birds darting in low shrubs. You who do not remember passage from the other world, I tell you I could speak again. Whatever returns from oblivion returns to find a voice. From the center of my life came a great fountain, deep blue shadows on azure seawater. There's a moment after you move your eye away when you forget where you are, because you've been living, it seems, somewhere else, in the silence of the night sky. You've stopped being here in the world. You're in a different place, a place where human life has no meaning. You're not a creature in a body. You exist as the stars exist, participating in their stillness, their immensity. Then you're in the world again, at night on a cold hill, taking the telescope apart. You realize afterward, not that the image is false, but the relation is false. You see again how far away each thing is from every other thing. One. The sun is setting behind the mountains. The earth is cooling. A stranger has tied his horse to a bare chestnut tree. The horse is quiet. He turns his head suddenly, hearing in the distance the sound of the sea. I make my bed for the night here, spreading my heaviest quilt over the damp earth. The sound of the sea. When the horse turns its head, I can hear it. On a path through the bare chestnut trees, a little dog trails its master. The little dog, didn't he used to rush ahead, straining the leash, as though to show his master what he sees there in the future, the path, call it what you will. Behind the trees at sunset, it is as though a great fire is burning between two mountains, so that the snow on the highest precipice seems for a moment to be burning also. Listen. At the path's end, the man is calling out. His voice has become very strange now, the voice of a person calling to what he can't see. Over and over, He calls out among the dark chestnut trees until the animal responds faintly from a great distance, as though this thing we fear were not terrible. Twilight. The stranger has untied his horse. The sound of the sea, just memory now. 2. Time passed, turning everything to ice. Under the ice, the future stirred. If you fell into it, you died. It was a time of waiting, of suspended action. I lived in the present, which was that part of the future you could see. The past floated above my head like the sun and moon, visible but never reachable. It was a time governed by contradiction, as in, I felt nothing and I was afraid. Winter emptied the trees, filled them again with snow. Because I couldn't feel, snow fell, the lake froze over. Because I was afraid, I didn't move. My breath was white, a description of silence. Time passed, and some of it became this. And some of it simply evaporated. You could see it float above the white trees, forming particles of ice. All your life you wait for the propitious time. Then the propitious time reveals itself as action taken. I watched the past move, a line of clouds moving from left to right or right to left, depending on the wind. Some days there was no wind. The clouds seemed to stay where they were, like a painting of the sea, more still than real. Some days, the lake was a sheet of glass. Under the glass, the future made demure, inviting sounds. You had to tense yourself so as not to listen. Time passed. You got to see a piece of it. The years it took with it were years of winter. They would not be missed. Some days, there were no clouds, as though the sources of the past had vanished. The world was bleached like a negative. The light passed directly through it. Then the image faded. Above the world, there was only blue, blue everywhere. 3. In late autumn, a young girl set fire to a field of wheat. The autumn had been very dry. The field went up like tinder. Afterward, there was nothing left. You walk through it, you see nothing. There's nothing to pick up, to smell. The horses don't understand it. Where is the field, they say, the way you and I would say, where is home? No one knows how to answer them. There is nothing left. You have to hope for the farmer's sake the insurance will pay. It is like losing a year of your life. To what would you lose a year of your life? Afterward, you go back to the old place. All that remains is char, blackness, and emptiness. You think, how could I live here? But it was different then, even last summer. The earth behaved as though nothing could go wrong with it. One match was all it took, but at the right time, it had to be the right time. The field parched, dry, the deadness in place already, so to speak. 4. I fell asleep in a river, I woke in a river. Of my mysterious failure to die, I can tell you nothing, neither who saved me nor for what cause. There was immense silence, no wind, no human sound. The bitter century was ended, the glorious gone, the abiding gone, the cold sun persisting as a kind of curiosity, a memento, time streaming behind it. The sky seemed very clear as it is in winter. The soil dry, uncultivated, the official light calmly moving through a slot of air, dignified, complacent, dissolving hope, subordinating images of the future to signs of the future's passing. I think I must have fallen. When I tried to stand, I had to force myself, being unused to physical pain. I had forgotten how harsh these conditions are. The earth not obsolete, but still, the river cold, shallow. Of my sleep, I remember nothing. When I cried out, my voice soothed me unexpectedly. In the silence of consciousness, I asked myself, why did I reject my life? And I answer, Die Erde überwältigt mich. The earth defeats me. I have tried to be accurate in this description in case someone else should follow me. I can verify that when the sun sets in winter, it is incomparably beautiful, and the memory of it lasts a long time. I think this means there was no night. The night was in my head. 5. After the sunset, we rode quickly in the hope of finding shelter before darkness. I could see the stars already, first in the eastern sky. We rode, therefore, away from the light and toward the sea, since I had heard of a village there. After some time, the snow began, not thickly at first, then steadily until the earth was covered with a white film. The way we traveled showed clearly when I turned my head. For a short while, it made a dark trajectory across the earth. Then the snow was thick, the path vanished. The horse was tired and hungry. He could no longer find sure footing anywhere. I told myself, I have been lost before, I have been cold before. The night has come to me exactly this way as a premonition. And I thought, if I am asked to return here, I would like to come back as a human being, and my horse to remain himself. Otherwise, I would not know how to begin again. Rain tomorrow, but tonight the sky is clear, the stars shine. Still, the rain's coming, maybe enough to drown the seeds. There's a wind from the sea pushing the clouds. Before you see them, you feel the wind. Better look at the fields now, see how they look before they're flooded. A full moon. Yesterday, a sheep escaped into the woods, and not just any sheep, the ram, the whole future. If we see him again, we'll see his bones. The grass shudders a little. Maybe the wind passed through it, and the new leaves of the olives shudder in the same way. Mice in the fields, where the fox hunts. Tomorrow there'll be blood in the grass, but the storm will wash it away. In one window, there's a boy sitting. He's been sent to bed too early, in his opinion. So he sits at the window. Everything is settled now. Where you are now is where you'll sleep, where you'll wake up in the morning. The mountain stands like a beacon to remind the night that the earth exists, that it mustn't be forgotten. Above the sea, the clouds form as the wind rises, dispersing them, giving them a sense of purpose. Tomorrow, the dawn won't come. The sky won't go back to being the sky of day. It will go on as night, except the stars will fade and vanish as the storm arrives, lasting perhaps 10 hours altogether. But the world as it was cannot return. One by one, the lights of the village houses dim, and the mountains shine in the darkness with reflected light. No sound, only cats scuffling in the doorways. They smell the wind. Time to make more cats. Later, they prowl the streets, but the smell of the wind stalks them. It's the same in the fields, confused by the smell of blood, though for now, only the wind rises, stars turn the field silver. This far from the sea, and still we know these signs. The night is an open book, but the world beyond the night remains a mystery. Like a child, the earth's going to sleep, or so the story goes. But I'm not tired, it says. And the mother says, you may not be tired, but I'm tired. You can see it in her face. Everyone can. So the snow has to fall, sleep has to come, because the mother's sick to death of her life and needs silence. The death and uncertainty that await me as they await all men, the shadows evaluating me because it can take time to destroy a human being, the element of suspense needs to be preserved. On Sundays, I walk my neighbor's dog so she can go to church to pray for her sick mother. The dog waits for me in the doorway. Summer and winter, we walk the same road, early morning at the base of the escarpment. Sometimes the dog gets away from me. For a moment or two, I can't see him behind some trees. He's very proud of this trick he brings out occasionally and gives up again as a favor to me. Afterward, I go back to my house to gather firewood. I keep in my mind images from each walk. Monarda growing by the roadside. In early spring, the dog chasing the little gray mice. So for a while, it seems possible not to think of the hold of the body weakening, the ratio of the body to the void shifting, and the prayers becoming prayers for the dead. Midday, the church bells finished. Light in excess, Still fog blankets the meadow, so you can't see the mountain in the distance, covered with snow and ice. When it appears again, my neighbor thinks her prayers are answered. So much light she can't control her happiness. It has to burst out in language. "Hello," she yells, as though that is her best translation. She believes in the Virgin the way I believe in the mountain, though in one case the fog never lifts. But each person stores his hope in a different place. I make my soup. I pour my glass of wine. I'm tense like a child approaching adolescence. Soon it will be decided for certain what you are. One thing, a boy or girl. Not both any longer. And the child thinks, I want to have a say in what happens, but the child has no say whatsoever. When I was a child, I did not foresee this. Later, the sun sets, the shadows gather, rustling the low bushes like animals just awake for the night. Inside, there's only firelight. It fades slowly. Now only the heaviest woods still flickering across the shelves of instruments. I hear music coming from them sometimes, even locked in their cases. When I was a bird, I believed I would be a man. That's the flute. And the horn answers. When I was a man, I cried out to be a bird. Then the music vanishes, and the secret it confides in me vanishes also. In the window, the moon is hanging over the earth, meaningless but full of messages. It's dead. It's always been dead, but it pretends to be something else, burning like a star, and convincingly so that you feel sometimes it could actually make something grow on earth. If there's an image of the soul, I think that's what it is. I move through the dark as though it were natural to me, as though I were already a factor in it. Tranquil and still, the day dawns. On market day, I go to the market with my lettuces. My body, now that we will not be traveling together much longer, I begin to feel a new tenderness toward you, very raw and unfamiliar, like what I remember of love when I was young. Love that was so often foolish in its objectives, but never in its choices, its intensities. Too much demanded in advance, too much that could not be promised. My soul has been so fearful, so violent. Forgive its brutality. As though it were that soul, my hand moves over you cautiously, not wishing to give offense, but eager finally to achieve expression as substance. It is not the earth I will miss. It is you I will miss. I found the stairs somewhat more difficult than I had expected, and so I sat down, so to speak, in the middle of the journey. Because there was a large window opposite the railing, I was able to entertain myself with the little dramas and comedies of the street outside, though no one I knew passed by, no one certainly who could have assisted me. nor were the stairs themselves in use as far as I could see. You must get up, my lad, I told myself. Since this seemed suddenly impossible, I did the next best thing. I prepared to sleep, my head and arms on the stair above, my body crouched below. Sometime after this, a little girl appeared at the top of the staircase, holding the hand of an elderly woman. "Grandmother," cried the little girl, "there is a dead man on the staircase." "We must let him sleep," said the grandmother. "We must walk quietly by. He is at that point in life at which neither returning to the beginning nor advancing to the end seems bearable. Therefore, he has decided to stop here in the midst of things, though this makes him an obstacle to others, such as ourselves. But we must not give up hope. In my own life," she continued, "there was such a time, though that was long ago." And here she let her granddaughter walk in front of her so they could pass me without disturbing me. I would have liked to hear the whole of her story, since she seemed, as she passed by, a vigorous woman, ready to take pleasure in life and at the same time forthright without illusions. But soon their voices faded into whispers, or they were far away. "Will we see him when we return?" the child murmured. "He will be long gone by then," said her grandmother. "He will have finished climbing up or down, as the case may be." "Then I will say goodbye now," said the little girl. And she knelt below me, chanting a prayer I recognized as the Hebrew prayer for the dead. "Sir," she whispered, "my grandmother tells me you are not dead, but I thought perhaps this would soothe you in your terrors, and I will not be here to sing it at the right time. When you hear this again," she said, "perhaps the words will be less intimidating if you remember how you first heard them in the voice of a little girl." As I turned over the last page after many nights, a wave of sorrow enveloped me. Where had they all gone, these people who had seemed so real? To distract myself, I walked out into the night. Instinctively, I lit a cigarette. In the dark, the cigarette glowed like a fire lit by a survivor. But who would see this light, this small dot among the infinite stars? I stood a while in the dark, the cigarette glowing and growing small, each breath patiently destroying me. How small it was, how brief, 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 but inside me now, which the stars could never be. Thank you.